The Great Amherst Mystery. Teen Girl, Poltergeist and the Haunted Farmhouse. Before you sleep tonight, hit subscribe, leave a comment, and remember this. Some stories don't stay buried in the past. On a cold night in Amherst, Nova Scotia, in the late 1870s, neighbors stood in the muddy yard outside a small wooden farmhouse, staring at the upstairs window. Inside that dark room, they could hear it again. 3 heavy bangs, spaced out like someone hitting the wall with a hammer. Then, to their shock, a 4th knock answered from somewhere deep inside the house, even though everyone was already outside. One man whispered that no one should be living in that room anymore. Someone else swore they heard a girl crying, even though the house was supposed to be empty. Hours later, when the noise finally stopped, a local carpenter and the town constable went back inside. They walked up the narrow staircase, the boards creaking under their boots. The small bedroom looked like any other poor farmhouse room. Thin mattress, iron bed frame, cracked plaster on the walls. But on the wall above the bed, scratched into the plaster as if by something sharp, were 2 words that made both men step back. Esther lives. To understand why a young girl's name would appear on the wall of a quiet Canadian farmhouse, you have to go back to when the house was full of life, not fear. The home belonged to the Teed family, a working-class household that took in relatives when they needed a place to stay. In 1878, a shy, pale teenager named Esther Cox moved in after going through what she later called a bad experience with a man. She did not talk about it, but her family noticed that she jumped at loud noises and avoided being alone. At first, life in the house seemed normal. Esther shared a bed with her sister, slept early, and helped with chores. But then small things started to happen. Her shoe, misplaced, bed covers pulled off in the night, faint taps along the headboard. The family thought it was stress, or maybe a prank. That was before the knocks grew louder, before the bed began to move, and before everyone in Amherst would learn her name. The pounding on Esther's bedroom wall became so loud that the entire Teed family began sleeping in shifts. No one wanted her left alone, not after the night her mattress lifted off the bed frame with her still on it, rising just enough for her sister to scream for help. When the family rushed in, the bed dropped flat with a dull thud. Esther was trembling so badly she could not speak. Everyone kept telling themselves there had to be a logical explanation, but each night pushed that explanation further out of reach. In the days that followed, the house felt tense, as if it were holding its breath. Even during daylight, strange things continued. Knocks would echo behind the walls when no one was upstairs. A tin cup rolled across the kitchen floor, even though the windows were closed. Esther began waking with sudden chills, clutching her blankets as if she sensed something standing over her. Her behavior worried the family. She was quiet, distracted, constantly looking at corners of the room, as if expecting something to move. Word spread quickly in a town as small as Amherst. Curious neighbors started dropping by, claiming they only wanted to check in, but staying long enough to listen for noises. Some heard nothing. Others walked away pale, insisting something was wrong inside that house. A schoolteacher swore he heard a tapping that seemed to mimic his own footsteps. A local seamstress said she saw a wooden box fall from a shelf with no one nearby. People argued about it in the general store, some calling it nerves, others calling it a sign of something darker. One night, with half the town gathered in the small bedroom, the knocking started again. Slow, steady, deliberate. Someone asked out loud, "Is this because of Esther?" The room fell silent. Then, clear as if someone had answered from inside the wall, came 2 sharp knocks. Those present stumbled backward. One was, man fainted. Another man muttered that they should leave the house immediately. But the moment that changed everything came seconds later. As the crowd watched, a message began forming on the cracked plaster above the bed. The faint scratch marks deepened, slowly revealing a single line as everyone froze in place. "Esther, we know you." And this time, no one could pretend it was just the house settling. By the following morning, the Teed farmhouse had transformed into something closer to an investigation site than a family home. Local authorities, clergymen, and skeptical townsfolk came in waves, each determined to find a rational explanation. Many left with more questions than answers. The writing on the wall was still there, shallow but unmistakable. No tool marks, no fingerprints, no sign anyone had climbed onto the bed or touched the plaster. It was as if the words had appeared without a human hand. Esther tried to go about her chores, but she could barely lift her head. She looked exhausted, frightened, and strangely detached, like someone living two lives, one in the daylight with her family, and another in the hours when the knocking began. People whispered behind her back, claiming she was cursed or unstable, while others insisted she was being tormented by something she couldn't control. Esther never responded. She only said she wished the noise would stop. For a brief moment, things did calm down. Nearly 3 days passed with nothing unusual. No tapping, no falling objects, no scratches on the wall. The house felt normal again. Some of the visiting townspeople relaxed, saying the whole ordeal had been the result of stress, imagination, and the lingering gossip from Esther's earlier trauma. Even the Teed family began hoping the nightmare was finally ending. But on the 4th night, everything changed with a sound that no one in the house ever forgot. It started as a single knock, deep and heavy. Not on the wall this time, but under Esther's bed. Her sister jolted awake and begged her not to move. A second knock followed, then a third, then a rapid series of taps that traveled across the floorboards like something, circling the bed. Her sister screamed for help and the family rushed in. As they crowded into the tiny bedroom, the knocks stopped abruptly. The room went still, so quiet that everyone could hear Esther's shaky breathing. For a moment, it seemed like the event had passed. Then, without warning, the bed jerked a few inches across the floor as if pulled by an unseen force. Everyone jumped back, shouting over each other, scrambling toward the door. But the most disturbing part was what Esther said when they finally pulled her into the hallway. With tears in her eyes and her voice barely above a whisper, she insisted she had heard someone speaking beneath the bed, someone calmly repeating her name. And now the townspeople, the authorities, and even her own family wanted to know. If Esther wasn't imagining it, who, or what, was calling out to her in the dark? The morning after the bed dragged across the floor, the Teed farmhouse was no longer just a local curiosity. It became a full community concern. A small group of men from the town, including a physician, a carpenter, and the local constable, gathered around the kitchen table. They all agreed on one thing. Whatever was happening, it was centered around Esther. But none of them could explain why. The doctor examined her and found no signs of illness, no injuries, nothing that pointed to a medical cause. Then he asked a question no one wanted to hear. Did something happen to her before all this began? The room fell silent. Her sister hesitated, then revealed what the family had tried to keep quiet. Weeks before moving in, Esther had been threatened by a man she knew, someone she trusted. She escaped unharmed, but the fear never left her. The doctor nodded slowly, suggesting trauma might be amplifying every strange sound and movement. But just as he started to explain further, a heavy thud echoed above them, shaking dust from the ceiling. Everyone froze. No one was upstairs. The men rushed to Esther's bedroom. The air felt colder, stillness filling the room. On the bed lay a small wooden box that had previously been stored in the shed behind the house, its lid open, tools scattered. The constable swore he had locked the shed himself earlier that morning. Before anyone could process it, another loud knock, this time from the wall behind the headboard, made every man jump. One of the men, a skeptic who had mocked the entire situation, stepped forward and tapped the wall twice. Immediately, 2 knocks came back in the same rhythm. He stepped away, his face pale. That wasn't an echo," he muttered. The group decided to test it again. They tapped 3 times. The response came instantly. 3 sharp, deliberate knocks. The room grew tense as all eyes moved toward Esther. She wasn't touching anything, wasn't moving at all. She sat on the edge of the bed with her head lowered, her hands shaking. When someone asked her if she knew what was happening, she only whispered, "It wants me to listen." That sentence terrified everyone more than the knocks. But the moment that ended all debate came when the constable, determined to prove there was a logical explanation, asked out loud, "Who are you?" For 10 long seconds there was nothing. Then a single knock answered, followed by another, and then a slow, dragging scratch across the wall, as if whatever was responding wanted time to think. The men backed out of the room, realizing something new. Whatever was communicating now wasn't just reacting. It was initiating. And the next night it would speak again. The next night arrived with a kind of tension the Teed family had never felt before. No one slept. No one even pretended to. Every lamp in the house burned until the oil ran low, and every door stayed open so no one would be alone. Esther sat wrapped in a blanket near the kitchen stove, her eyes fixed on the floor as if waiting for something only she could hear. Outside, the wind rattled the windows. Inside, the entire house held its breath. Just after midnight, the knocks returned, but softer this time, almost gentle. They came from the hallway leading to the stairs. 3 taps, a pause, then 3 more, traveling upwards step by step. Everyone backed into the kitchen as the sound climbed higher, reaching the landing outside the bedrooms. The constable, who had returned out of concern for the family, whispered that they should stay together. But before anyone could move, a sudden, harsh thud shook the top floor. Esther flinched violently. Her sister grabbed her, terrified she might collapse. Then came the final moment that sealed this case in Canadian history. A faint scribbling sound echoed from upstairs, like chalk dragging across a board. The constable and 2 other men slowly climbed the staircase, each step creaking beneath their weight. At the top, they saw something no one could explain. Fresh writing on the plaster wall opposite Esther's bedroom door. Not scratched in this time. Not carved. Written. Clear. Legible. "Esther, please speak." The men stood frozen. No one had been upstairs. No one had passed them. No one could have written the words without being seen. They called the others up to witness it, each person staring in disbelief at the message that seemed to appear out of thin air. Esther's breathing grew quick and shallow, and she whispered that she didn't want to answer, that whatever it was, felt close. No one pushed her. No one dared ask anything further. In the weeks that followed, the activity began to fade. The knocks became less frequent, the objects stopped moving, and the strange writings disappeared. Esther eventually left the Teed home for a period, staying with friends in another town. And with her gone, the house fell completely silent, as if whatever had been trying to reach her no longer knew where to look. Investigators, journalists, and skeptics argued about the Amherst mystery for decades. Some insisted it was psychological stress made physical. Others believed it was staged by excited townsfolk. But dozens of witnesses, teachers, police officers, ministers, neighbors, stood firm in their accounts. They didn't claim to know what caused it. Only what they heard, what they saw, and what they could never forget. To this day, the Great Amherst Mystery remains one of the most documented cases of unexplained phenomena in North America. No final explanation was ever agreed upon. No confession. No scientific breakthrough. Just a girl at the center of something no one could fully understand. And the most unsettling part? Every person who visited the Teed farmhouse during that year said the same thing when asked what frightened them most. Not the knocks, not the messages, not the shaking furniture, but the feeling, cold, quiet, unmistakable, that something in that house was listening. If this story left you with chills, you might not be ready for what comes next. Subscribe before the next mystery finds you first.